I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Do you know what your core values are? If you come from a high demand background, it's possible you haven't taken the opportunity to thoughtfully consider your core values. Brené Brown said, living into our values means that we do more than profess our values. We practice them. We walk our talk. We are clear about what we believe and hold important, and we take care that our intentions, words, thoughts, and behaviors align with those beliefs, end quote. But before you can walk your talk, you must identify what your core values are. Research has shown that it is traumatizing when a therapist or mental health support person tries to impose their values upon their client. As a life transitions coach, I do not tell my clients what their values are or what they should be. Identifying your core values is like thinking ahead of time. It reduces decision fatigue. It becomes your North Star, guiding you as you navigate new decisions or decisions you've come to realize that perhaps you didn't get to choose in the first place. Click the link in the show notes for my Determine Your Values free guide. It will help you take the first steps to living a values-driven and aligned life by helping you identify what matters most to you. First Friday's free coaching, a confidential group to bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement. Welcome to Stages of Faith, Part 3, Perplexity. First thing I want to remind you of as we're getting into this episode is that the metaphor that Brian McLaren uses for the stages of faith, rather than looking at them as though you're graduating from one stage to the next, he likes the metaphor of a tree. And like he explained at the Restore conference last year, 2023, he said, what seemed more helpful for me is to use the metaphor of a tree. You start with a tree that has just one little ring, and then a new ring grows out from that, and then a new ring grows out from that. The new ring does not replace the old ring. It depends on the old ring. It builds on the old ring. It includes it and transcends it. It includes it and grows beyond it. So hopefully you've had the opportunity or taken the opportunity to listen to episodes number 124 and 126, which each describe the stages of faith, part 1 and then part 2, simplicity and then complexity. Brian describes moving into a stage 3 faith as like, quote, when someone feels so stuck, so trapped, and so stagnant, they decide to burn down the whole structure. And on their way out of the burning building, many grab for some mementos of faith to save, and others barely make it out alive, saving nothing but their lives, end quote. That's on page 54 of Faith After Doubt. You know, and when I read that the very first time, several years ago when the book came out, that resonated. And I read that and it still brings up feeling and emotion for me. And maybe it does for you. So if you recall from episode 126, I brought up some scenarios that could cause someone to have to move from a stage 1 simplistic faith to a more complex faith, stage 2. It forces you to leave that dualistic view of life. I brought up scenarios like the divorce of a close family member, or perhaps a loved one who marries outside of your faith, or drug or alcohol use, learning a family member identifies as LGBTQ+, or an ecclesiastical leader who cheats on their spouse and ends up leaving them, or someone who gets pregnant out of wedlock. If you haven't listened to that episode, I recommend that you go back. Each of these I've purposely made them very short. So those scenarios, someone at a stage 2 faith would take those scenarios and place blame or fault, perhaps on the individuals, such as, well, they weren't attending church, so of course they got married outside of the faith, or they were not following the word of wisdom or code of health or the commandments, and so they got an addiction. They weren't being obedient or following the law of chastity, and so they got pregnant. Or in the case of divorce, maybe sound something like, well, they weren't attending mass or synagogue or the temple quite enough, and so that led to divorce. They are seeing things in a very dualistic way. It's either this or it's that. Whereas a person at a stage 3 level of faith sees things a little differently. They start to see the situation on a larger, much grander scale. They're able to zoom out and look outside of themselves, look outside of the organization, and see a bigger picture, one that is potentially missing pieces or has missed truths or misinterpreted concepts. The stage 3 person of faith is able to say, wait a second, what might I be missing here? What part of the story is outside of my scope that I don't have access to yet? They are able to not just acknowledge, but absolutely not look away from things that could contribute to the scenario. For instance, things like abuse could play a role, or the socioeconomic status of an individual, or perhaps their familial background and or influence. It could be their race or ethnicity, or perhaps even the educational opportunities that they were or were not afforded. All of these things could play a role in those scenarios that I mentioned. But above all, a stage 3 faith realizes it's not their duty, place, or position to judge, and the Christ-like thing to do is to love. Going back to faith, the book, Faith After Doubt, kind of summarizing from chapter 6, Brian says, quote, talking about persons at a stage 2 faith, real life, they realized, is more mysterious, less formulaic, and more messy than sermons about 3 easy steps to marital bliss, or 5 certain cures for depression, or 7 keys to biblical prosperity. They learned stage 2 feels a little shallow, a little fake, and they are craving depth and honesty. He continues, page 63, this quest for honesty and depth burns like a fire in the belly and baptizes people into stage 3, or perplexity. Folks in stage 3 feel life is more than simple and more than complex. It is downright mysterious, downright perplexing. And on 64, he continues, questions glow like hot embers in their hearts, and many unsettled believers in stage 2 feel increasingly desperate for something, anything beyond dualistic simplicity and pragmatic complexity. And then he says how they'll often find that in the form of books or podcasts or online groups and whatnot, versus in real life spiritual communities. And then on page 66, he continues, for people who have outgrown stages 1 and 2 and who find themselves in the dynamic space of stage 3, doubt and its cousins, deconstruction, suspicion, and relativism, are not enemies to be kept at bay. They are doorways to insight and liberation. They learn that it's only by doubting institutions, authority figures, mission statements, limited perspectives, groupthink, and the like, is how they can discover inconvenient truths that are being carefully hidden on behalf of some individual or group's self-interest, end quote. Honestly, it was in this doubting of limited perspectives that sent me on my pivot in my faith journey several years back. When it came to LGBTQ plus identity and experience of my child, and then the messages that I had received all of my life, it just wasn't adding up for me. I know what it's like to feel the guidance of the Spirit or the divine, whatever words you use. And I knew deep inside, I knew that something felt off, that there was something that was missing. Brian said this at the Restore conference of stage 3. You feel that all is subjective and deconstructible, and life is a protest of these hypocrisies and oversimplifications. and that you're trying to find truth and honesty and at least the amount of humility necessary to admit that you don't know everything. In perplexity, I find meaning not in the group I used to belong to, but in the presence of a group similarly alienated people, because I'm looking for people who give me space to think and be different and wonder and have questions, end quote. When I started on this journey in 2019, this is what I desperately needed and wanted and desired, to have a safe space to think, be different, and wonder and have questions. And initially, I really resisted entering into what I eventually learned was stage 3 faith. I think that I made it mean a lot of things about me as a person of faith, as a believer, as a parent, and so on. However, I felt God nudging me pretty strongly to start this podcast. And in the beginning, that gave me great pause. It was way out of my comfort zone, and I just kind of froze at the thought of doing it. So it took me about a year to act on it, and I'm so glad that I did. I truly feel through this podcast, I've been able to make meaningful connections and have some very stirring discussions and kind of build a community of sorts where guests and listeners alike can share stories and feel seen and heard. And I truly hope that you have been able to experience this for yourself. And maybe you'll even want to come on and be a guest and share your story. Reach out to me if you feel that nudge or feel your heart pricked. But for now, that is all for this episode. Please make sure to subscribe so that you're notified first when future episodes publish. And while you're at it, it would mean the world to me if you would just take a moment and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for joining me. Until next time. Story mapping is a key component of my signature program, Life Outside the Binary. When you experience an awakening and see for yourself that the world is not all black and white, you get to choose which of your long-held stories align and live outside the ones that don't. Have you hit a wall and simply cannot figure out what to do to move past, or feel stuck and unsure of what your next move is or how to find it? Did you know the real challenge isn't the wall or the feeling stuck, but rather the story you have written and are living in about yourself and about the wall and about the feeling of stuckness? What you tell yourself about your value, character, abilities, and power to work through and move past problems, concerns, walls, or feeling stuck could be what is really in the way. The thing is, most of us can't see these stories for ourselves. That's where I come in. I invite you to join me for a story mapping session. You will gain more than insight, clarity, and at least one tool you can start using today. You'll remember or learn for the first time how to breathe again. You will start to feel a glimmer of hope and sense possibilities. You'll start to see where your stories end and you begin. Nothing is off limits in our 75-minute intensive. The link is in the show notes. Use promo code PRIDE2024, that's PRIDE 2024, no spaces, for a special story mapping offer just for the month of June. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more, or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.